The story begins with a man named Eddie Mora, a struggling writer living in New York. Eddie dreams of writing a novel that will make him famous and wealthy, but reality looks very different. For weeks, he has been sitting in front of his computer, unable to write even a single page. Every time he tries to start, his mind feels completely blank. His thoughts seem to hit an invisible wall, leaving him stuck in a frustrating state of writer's block. One afternoon, Eddie meets his girlfriend Lindy at a cafe. He expects a normal conversation, but the meeting quickly turns serious. Lindy explains that she wants to end their relationship. She tells Eddie she is tired of supporting him financially and paying his bills while he struggles to finish his book. Eddie is shocked by this decision. In his mind, everything between them had been fine, and he even believed they would eventually get married. But Lindy has already made up her mind. She believes their relationship has no future and walks away, leaving Eddie devastated. After leaving the cafe, Eddie wanders through the streets feeling defeated. By chance, he runs into Vernon, the brother of his ex-wife, Melissa. Vernon immediately notices how terrible Eddie looks. His clothes are messy and he seems exhausted, almost like someone who has been living on the street. Trying to save his pride, Eddie quickly claims that he is simply very busy with work. He says he recently signed a contract for his book and has been so focused on writing that he barely has time for anything else. Vernon clearly doesn't believe him. Instead of arguing, Vernon suggests they grab a drink together. During their conversation, Vernon admits that he has lost contact with his sister Melissa because she moved to another state. Eddie also admits something embarrassing. Despite having a contract for his book, he hasn't written a single line in weeks and is falling far behind schedule. That's when Vernon revealed something unusual. He says he now works for a pharmaceutical company and has access to an experimental drug. According to him, this pill allows the human brain to operate at its full capacity. Vernon explains that most people only use a small portion of their brain's potential, but this drug can unlock everything at once. The pill is called NZT. Vernon claims that with NZT, a person can access every memory they have ever experienced and process information at incredible speed. The problem is that the drug costs about $800 per pill. Eddie immediately refuses. He doesn't have that kind of money and doesn't want to get involved with something illegal. But Vernon surprises him by simply handing him one pill for free. He gives Eddie his business card and leaves. Standing alone on the street, Eddie looks at the small pill in his hand. At first, he hesitates, but then he realizes that his life can't get much worse than it already is. With nothing left to lose, he swallows the pill. The effect happens almost instantly. As Eddie walks up the stairs to his apartment, he runs into his landlord's wife. She angrily demands that he pay his overdue rent. Normally, Eddie would panic in this situation, but now something strange happens. His mind suddenly becomes incredibly clear. In just a few seconds, Eddie notices small details about the woman. He sees the nervous expression on her face and notices a law textbook sticking out of her bag. Instantly, he understands that she is struggling with her studies. At the same time, memories from books he read years ago begin flowing into his mind. Information that had been buried in his subconscious suddenly becomes organized and easy to access. Instead of arguing, Eddie calmly helps her organize her study notes and even explains a difficult legal concept. The woman is amazed and quickly forgets about the rent. When Eddie enters his apartment, he sees the messy chaos around him. Dirty dishes, scattered papers, and piles of trash fill the room. Suddenly, he feels an overwhelming burst of motivation. Within minutes, he begins cleaning everything. He organizes the entire apartment with incredible efficiency. After finishing, he sits down at his computer and begins writing his book. This time, the words come effortlessly. Sentences flow perfectly from his mind to the screen. Ideas connect smoothly, and the story develops exactly the way he imagined. Eddie writes all night without stopping. When he finally falls asleep, he feels like a completely different person. But the next morning, everything changes. The sharp focus is gone. His mind feels slow again, and the brilliant clarity from the night before has disappeared. Eddie realizes the pill's effect has worn off. However, the pages he wrote are still there, Curious, he sends the text to his editor. Soon afterward, he returns home and hears several excited messages on his answering machine. His editor is amazed by the quality of the writing and wants to talk immediately. Eddie suddenly realizes something disturbing. The person who wrote that brilliant chapter doesn't feel like the real him. It feels like a completely different version of himself. Determined to experience that power again, Eddie goes to visit Vernon. When he arrives, he notices something strange. Vernon's face is bruised and beaten. Vernon refuses to explain what happened, but admits that NZT has not been approved by the government. Its production and distribution are completely illegal. Eddie asks if he can buy more pills. Vernon agrees to discuss it, but first asks Eddie to do him a favor. He wants Eddie to pick up his suit from the dry cleaner and bring breakfast. Eddie quickly completes the errands and returns to the apartment. But when he walks inside, he finds Vernon lying on the floor, dead. Shocked by the scene, Eddie immediately calls the police. While waiting for them to arrive, he quickly realizes something important. The apartment has clearly been searched. Furniture is overturned and drawers have been pulled open. Whoever killed Vernon was looking for something. Eddie guesses that the killer was searching for the NZT pills, but may not have found them. Knowing the police will arrive soon, Eddie starts searching the apartment himself. In the kitchen, he finally finds a hidden package inside the oven. Inside the package are several NZT pills and a large amount of cash. He hides the pills just before the police arrive. At the station, Eddie tells the officers that he barely knew Vernon and had only met him by coincidence. Since there's no evidence connecting him to the crime, the police eventually release him. The moment he returns home, Eddie takes another pill. Once again, his mind becomes perfectly clear. Using the money he found in Vernon's apartment, Eddie spends the next 4 days working non-stop. With 1 pill per day, he completes his entire novel. But he doesn't stop there. With his new abilities, Eddie begins learning everything he can about different subjects. He studies poker strategies, musical theory, languages, medicine, and finance. His intelligence seems limitless. He becomes confident and charismatic. In social situations, he easily becomes the center of attention. His fear and insecurity disappear completely. Soon, Eddie becomes interested in the stock market. Using the last $800 of Vernon's money, he begins trading small investments. Within a few days, he turns that money into $7,000. Even though this growth is impressive, Eddie wants something bigger. Since banks refuse to give him a loan, he turns to a dangerous man named Gennady, or a Russian crime boss. Gennady agrees to lend him $100,000 with extremely high interest. Using this money, Eddie begins serious trading. His analytical abilities allow him to predict market movements with incredible accuracy. By the end of the week, his investment account grows to more than $2 million. News about his success spreads quickly. Soon, Eddie receives an invitation to meet Carl Van Loon, a powerful and respected billionaire financier. Meanwhile, Eddie's personal life begins improving as well. Lindy agrees to meet him again for dinner. This new version of Eddie impresses her completely. He speaks perfect Italian during their meal and seems to understand her emotions without her saying a word. Before long, they start dating again. However, strange problems begin appearing. Eddie starts noticing a mysterious man following him through the city. At the same time, he occasionally experiences sudden memory gaps and moments of disorientation. During one strange episode, Eddie suddenly finds himself in a subway station after somehow walking 20 blocks without remembering the journey. In another moment, he ends up in a bar fight with several men. Even though he has never been trained in combat, he somehow defeats them easily. His mind recalls martial arts techniques he once saw in movies and instantly applies them. Later, he wakes up in a hotel room with a woman he doesn't recognize. 18 hours of his life are completely missing. The next day, Eddie discovers that the woman from the hotel, Maria Winter, has been murdered. News reports say witnesses saw a man leaving her room. Terrified that he might somehow be responsible, Eddie panics and runs home. Soon he meets Melissa, Vernon's sister, who warns him about the dangers of NZT. She explains that many people who used the drug either died or became seriously ill. Herself, she used the pills once, but eventually stopped because the side effects became unbearable. Now she suffers constant headaches and cannot concentrate. Melissa advises Eddie to slowly reduce his dosage before the drug destroys his brain. Unfortunately, new threats appear at the same time. Gennady returns and demands more pills after discovering their power. Meanwhile, the mysterious man who has been following Eddie continues searching for him. The situation becomes even more dangerous when Lindy is chased through the city by the same man. Desperate to escape, Lindy takes one of Eddie's pills. Within seconds, her mind becomes incredibly sharp. She calculates the fastest escape routes and cleverly uses her surroundings to avoid the attacker. Eventually, she manages to wound him and escape. When she reunites with Eddie, he finally takes another pill and begins planning his next move. But the deeper he goes into this world of power, money, and danger, the harder it becomes to escape. After the attack on Lindy, Eddie realizes his life has become extremely dangerous. Gennady now understands the true power of the NZT pills and begins demanding more of them. To delay the situation, Eddie gives him several pills, hoping it will buy time. At the same time, Eddie's influence in the financial world continues to grow. His work with billionaire financier Carl Van Loon becomes more serious. Thanks to Eddie's incredible analytical skills, the company begins preparing for one of the largest corporate mergers in history. However, Eddie knows that his advantage will not last forever. The supply of NZT pills is slowly running out. To solve this problem, he secretly hires a chemist and offers him $2 billion to produce a new batch of the drug. The chemist agrees, and Eddie begins hiding pills inside specially designed pockets in all of his suits, so he will always have access to them. But his situation becomes more complicated when the police investigation into Maria Winter's murder starts pointing toward him. A witness claims to have seen Eddie near the hotel the night she died. Fortunately, the identification process becomes confusing. The witness cannot clearly recognize Eddie among several similar-looking men. For the moment, the accusation against him disappears. Meanwhile, another major problem emerges. During a meeting with Carl Van Loon, Eddie suddenly realizes he forgot to take one of his pills earlier. As the drug's effects fade, his brilliant mind begins slowing down again. When he secretly checks his supply, he discovers something terrible. All of his pills are gone. Soon afterward, Eddie receives a disturbing message from Gennady. Inside a package delivered to him are the severed hands of the bodyguards he had hired for protection. Eddie immediately understands what happened. Someone stole his pills, and his security team has been brutally murdered. When he returns to his apartment, he hears someone knocking on the door. Gennady's voice demands that Eddie open it immediately. Without the pills, Eddie knows he cannot fight back. For a moment, he considers ending his life by jumping from the balcony rather than facing torture. But then he suddenly remembers something important. One last pill might still be hidden somewhere in the apartment. While Gennady and his men begin breaking down the door, Eddie desperately searches through drawers and boxes. Just as they enter the apartment, he finally finds the pill. Unfortunately, he drops it before he can swallow it. Gennady captures him and begins questioning him about the rest of the supply. Confident that Eddie is helpless, the crime boss explains that he has discovered a new way to use the drug. Instead of swallowing the pill, he injects the substance directly into his bloodstream for a stronger effect. As Gennady's men continue searching the apartment, Eddie secretly grabs a knife. When Gennady steps closer, Eddie suddenly attacks him, stabbing him fatally. However, Eddie is extremely weak and exhausted. Then he realizes something important. The NZT drug is now circulating inside Gennady's blood. Desperate to survive, Eddie presses the dying man to the floor and drinks his blood. Within seconds, the drug begins affecting him again. His mind clears instantly. Thoughts organize themselves into perfect order, and Eddie quickly calculates every possible move his enemies might make. Using this advantage, he fights back and defeats the remaining criminals inside the apartment. After surviving the attack, Eddie continues moving forward with his plans. Soon afterward, Hank Atwood, the powerful businessman involved in the merger deal, dies in the hospital. Eddie informs Atwood's bodyguard that the medicine which could have saved his boss had been stolen by a lawyer named Morris Brandt. Angry about this betrayal, the bodyguard decides to deal with Brandt himself. With his enemies gradually disappearing, Eddie finally gains full control over his situation. 1 year later, Eddie Mora has completely transformed his life. He is now running for the United States Senate. During his campaign, Carl Van Loon requests a private meeting with him. The billionaire reveals that he knows the truth about NZT. After investigating Eddie's activities, he discovered the laboratory producing the drug and bought the company, shutting it down. Van Loon explains that he can restart production whenever he wants. In exchange, he wants Eddie's cooperation. If Eddie eventually becomes president, he must support the financial interests of certain powerful groups, but Eddie calmly refuses. He reveals that he had already predicted this situation. Over the past year, he secretly arranged multiple laboratories to produce the drug independently. He also spent months gathering information about Van Loon himself. Now, Eddie understands every weakness his enemies have. To prove it, he analyzes Van Loon's behavior and even predicts a future heart problem that will soon require surgery. Realizing that he cannot control Eddie anymore, Van Loon leaves. Later, Eddie meets Lindy for lunch. This time he orders food in fluent Chinese without any effort. Unlike before, she is no longer surprised. Eddie Mora has become something entirely different from the struggling writer he once was. And now, with his mind operating at a level far beyond ordinary humans, his ambitions are only just beginning. And with that, friends, this story comes to an end. Tell us in the comments how you liked the explanation. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.